Enjoy 1% merchant commission when you accept Lanka Pay cards. Contact these banks today.
Sri Lanka received overwhelming support from countries of the Global South at the interactive dialogue on the written update of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on Sri Lanka, which concluded on Monday, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Peiris said. Minister Peiris made this remarks during a media briefing today.
The interactive dialogue on Sri Lanka was concluded at the 49th session of the Human Rights Council, which was held in Geneva yesterday. It is a matter of deep satisfaction to us that the Sri Lanka government's position was endorsed by 31 out of the 45 countries that participated in the interactive dialogue on Sri Lanka. That is a very considerable triumph, because we very clearly indicated to the international community the position that is Sri Lanka is taking up with regard to these issues. The measures that we have taken, the progress that we have achieved on the ground, where we are today, what is our trajectory for the future, what is our roadmap. With regard to all these matters, we provided very clear, succinct explanations to the international community, and I am very happy as a leader of the delegation that as many as 31 out of 45 countries found what we said to them convincing, and they expressed their support, their understanding of the situation, and their encouragement to the government of Sri Lanka to continue further on the path that they have embarked upon. Now, this was possible as a result of a collective effort on the part of a large number of people, all the members of the Sri Lanka delegation who were present with me in Geneva. His Excellency C.A. Chandraprema, our permanent representative in Geneva, and his staff, and the ambassadors, high commissioners, and officials of all the missions in the relevant countries. It was a conjoint, a collaborative effort directed towards a common objective, and I would like to thank all of those who contributed to this effort, which resulted in the Sri Lankan position being endorsed by an overwhelming majority of the international community. Now, I presented to them 5 basic points. The first of these is, look at the contemporary world today. Look at the problems in some parts of the world. On the cusp of a major war. Hostilities have already started in some areas. In that situation, this focus on Sri Lanka, oral updates, written reports, investigative mechanisms, what have you, all of this every 6 months. Is this balanced? Is this proportionate? Then why is this happening? Why single out Sri Lanka? Is there any rational justification for this focus on Sri Lanka, a country that is living in peace, no problem to anybody? This relentless pursuit of Sri Lanka in the midst of a myriad of problems of extraordinary complexity, can this be in any manner whatsoever explained, much less justified? This was my first contention. The second is, now this oral update was about an examination of the report that was submitted to the Human Rights Council by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Her Excellency Michelle Bachelet. When you read the report, it is obvious that 80–85% of its contents have to do with internal Sri Lankan issues. Internal. Matters for the Parliament of Sri Lanka, Government of Sri Lanka, and for the people of Sri Lanka. Constitutional arrangements, the propriety or impropriety of appointments to high positions in the Sri Lankan administration. These are not matters for the Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council has a limited mandate from the General Assembly. So, is there any basis, any acceptable basis for probing with this degree of intensity what are admittedly internal affairs of Sri Lanka? Is that the purpose and function of the Human Rights Council? What are the implications of this? That was my second point. The third point is clear discrimination here. There is an inquisition in respect of Sri Lanka, an inquisitorial procedure. Why only Sri Lanka? Is the High Commissioner and the Human Rights Council prepared to embark upon a similar inquisitorial procedure in respect of all the other countries of the United Nations system? If that were to happen, what would be the result? The predecessor of the Human Rights Council, the Human Rights Commission, collapsed because it attempted something of that kind and the international community decisively rejected that. So if the Human Rights Council were now to take it upon itself to go into the internal affairs of countries that are members of the United Nations system, where would it all end? And if they are not prepared to do it for other countries, why single out Sri Lanka? It is discriminatory. It is intrusive. The United Nations Charter, the other seminal instruments of the United Nations system set out very clearly that action must be based on the principles of objectivity, impartiality and non-selectivity. What is non-selectivity here? Sri Lanka is singled out and there is a relentless pursuit of our country. So that is the third point, double standards and discrimination. The fourth point was this. The colossal amounts of money that are being spent on this exercise. Evidence gathering, evidence collecting, evidence analyzing. We are not told where this evidence is coming from. Lurking in the shadows under the cloak of anonymity, highly biased allegations are made against Sri Lanka and those are elevated to the level of gospel truth. Millions of dollars are being expended on this exercise in a situation where half the population of the world are struggling for access to life-saving vaccines. Half the population of the world are without one single vaccine. Now, is this a sensible use of the scarce resources that are available to the world community in the face of an unprecedented financial crisis? That's the fourth point. The fifth and final point was this. What is the result of the expenditure of these colossal amounts of money? Is it doing any good? On the contrary, it is doing enormous harm. It is splitting the international community right down the middle. Every 6 months, countries are forced to say aye or nay. Do you support these resolutions? Do you oppose these resolutions? Are you going to sit in the middle by abstaining from voting? There is enormous fatigue, embarrassment, and a sense of futility. The reality is dawning on the international community that this has been going on since 2012 and it has yielded no positive results whatsoever. Just as much as it is polarizing the international community, is also causing serious divisions within the public of Sri Lanka. In the name of reconciliation, what we want to do is to unite people, not to rub salt in old wounds. Now that purpose is certainly not being accomplished. The opposite is happening as a result of this inexorable pursuit of Sri Lanka over a whole decade. Must we continue with this? Does it serve any purpose? So these are the 5 basic points that I addressed to the international community, and as I said earlier, it is a matter of profound satisfaction that 31 out of 45 countries found these arguments acceptable. They were winning arguments. They were convinced. And that is why they expressed their support for Sri Lanka, their understanding of the Sri Lankan situation.
For more latest news, subscribe to FTTV.